Can you see my slideshow? Yes?
Yes, Ginger, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, as I mentioned, this is the Rubin Educational Series 2023 Immigrant Welcome Center, and we're very happy to have you all with us today. We are going to discuss the barriers for English learning for immigrants in Central Indiana, as I mentioned. And we hope through this event to raise awareness of the barriers and discuss action steps. And the plan is to start with a bit of background information from IWC, and then meet the panelists and ask them questions. And then we'll take a few questions from the audience via chat. And finally, if there's time, hopefully brainstorm some action steps. As you know, this was supposed to be an in-person event with light lunch and networking. So here's our unfortunately very light lunch. I gave everyone an opportunity to take a moment to imagine tasting all of this delicious food. And the networking we will do by putting in the chat, if you're comfortable, putting in the chat the organization or program or school district that you work with. That will give people an opportunity to see who you are and where you're from. So as I share this, you're welcome to write in the chat your name and your organization that you are with. Okay, did you all enjoy that food? Is that good? Okay, Matt is shaking his head. Okay, the vision of Immigrant Welcome Center is to see every immigrant in Indiana thriving. In 2018-19, IWC led a research project to discover the barriers to English learning for the immigrant population in our city. And based on that research, some action steps have been taken, but we know that there's a long way to go to making language learning more accessible and thus making our city and state more welcoming to newcomers. We're excited to have you gathered here today to carry on the conversation and learn about which barriers are being addressed in intentional ways and which ones still require attention. To frame today's discussion, we wanted to share a bit of basic data on Indiana's immigrants. In 2018, Indiana's population was made up of 5% immigrants. That number increased to 5.3% in 2022. So the big takeaway from this is the percentage of immigrants in our state is increasing. This slide focuses on Central Indiana, which is, again, the region we're highlighting for our discussion today. The closer we get to Indianapolis, the higher the percentage of immigrant population. The surrounding Indianapolis area has 7.1% foreign-born population, whereas Indianapolis itself has 10% foreign-born population. It still holds true that roughly 1 in 10 Marion County residents speak a language other than English at home. Where are those immigrants from? Well, this list is based on a site which relies on census data, and the data shows that the top 5 countries are Mexico, India, Myanmar or Burma, China, and Nigeria. Perhaps this data doesn't actually reflect the ELL population in your school or program or community. Given the difficulty and barriers to filling out census forms, I think what we are seeing in our schools and programs is also a key indicator of the immigrant population in our city. For instance, in the adult education programs, which are one of the main providers of English classes for adult immigrants, we see this language data from Region 5, which is Marion and Donut counties. So we see Spanish is the top language, French, Haitian Creole, Burmese, and Arabic. The two overlapping data points with the census data is Mexico and Myanmar or Burma being in the top 5 countries of origin. So those two data points overlap, but the other ones don't as much. in IWC's Pathway to Literacy program, which is located in the Indianapolis area and geared towards learners with limited or interrupted formal schooling, we see this country data: Afghanistan, Myanmar or Burma, Democratic Republic of Congo, Eritrea, and Guinea. So the only country that's the same as in the census data is Myanmar. And again, this could be in part due to arrival date or difficulty in completing census forms. So what we can be sure of is that roughly 90,000 immigrants live in Marion County. That's about 10% of the current population of Indianapolis. So one more key data point to get us thinking comes from the Department of Workforce Development, which funds the major adult ELL serving programs in the state. In central Indiana, these programs include the 3 Ws, Washington Township, Wayne Township, Warren Township, and the career centers like Central 9 and Blue River, and Indy Reads and Marion University. So last year, according to DWD, 3,025 English language learners were served through adult education in central Indiana. This, of course, doesn't include the alternative high school programs such as Excel Center and Crystal House Doors, which provide ELL classes for people seeking to earn a high school diploma, nor does it include any faith-based or K-12 classes for adult ELLs, or private language companies or university-based language programs, or classes provided through refugee resettlement organizations. So it doesn't include all of those opportunities for classes for adult English language learners. Nevertheless, I think the numbers speak to the need. There's 90,000 immigrants, some of whom need English classes, and 3,025 were served through one of the main providers. Of course, we know many immigrants don't need or want English classes, but for those who do, what barriers do they face? The panelists will share about barriers faced, both from an organizational standpoint and their lived experiences. So based on the research project from 2018-19 that IWC conducted, these barriers stood out. I'm going to quickly mention 9 barriers, and then we're going to move into our panel discussion. So barriers of transportation, work schedules and fatigue, limited literacy, health issues, family schedules and childcare, feelings of fear or I can't, no information about classes, lack of available classes, like not enough classes, and difficult registration forms. As you listen to the panelists, please take notes and write down questions and add other ideas. Down below, there's a line for other. These were supposed to be on your chairs for the in-person meeting. So we'll have a time for questions from the audience at the end of using the chat function. But for now, we will meet our panelists. So the panelists, I am not sure, but I hope you're all here. So if you're a panelist, could you turn on your video? And the rest of you who have your video on, it's okay, but okay. So we are happy to have Lara Pastore. She's the Director of Instructional Design with Department of Workforce Development. You want to wave, Lara? Okay, there she is. We're excited to have, is Michael here? Michael Mugoovi, are you here? Okay, not sure. Yes. Yeah, oh, yes, okay, you're here. Okay, yay. So Michael is the case manager at Exodus Refugee Immigration, and also the former parent liaison at Washington Township Schools. So he is here. Erica Sponberg, she's the English learner specialist from Department of Education. We're happy to have her here. And then Aryan Ibrahim, she is the program coordinator at IWC. And finally, Yohana Villamizar, she is a recently arrived immigrant from Venezuela. And Misty Cisneros, can you wave? Misty is from Immigrant Welcome Center, and she will provide interpretation for Yohana. Okay, so now we are about to begin our panel. Now, honestly, I've never quite done a panel like this, so I just want to let everyone know. But we will start with one question for one panelist. And so I think if we can spotlight the one panelist that we are talking to at that moment, I think that would be great. So we're going to start with Lara from the DWD. So I will spotlight you. I think I can spotlight. There you are. Okay. So Lara, could you do a brief introduction of yourself? And then also, in a desire to focus first on what we as a city are doing well, could you please share about how DWD is currently serving ELLs?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ginger. And you're doing a great job for your first time. I just have to tell you, well done. So my name is Lara Pastore, and I am the Director of Instructional Design with the Department of Workforce Development. I've been in this role for about a year. Before that, I was at Washington Township Adult Education as part of the administrative team. And I was in that role for about 11 years. And one of the core populations in Washington Township was the immigrant learner. And while we talk a lot about students who are ELL learners, English language learners, a lot of those students, once they progress through the scope of instruction in learning English, transition on to what's called high school equivalency preparation, or the adult basic education side. So while we were highlighting 3,000 ELL students in Central Indiana in the last program year, it's actually quite a few more, because a lot of them transition on to ABE, and it's just harder to capture whether they're a native English speaker or a non-native English speaker once they transition into that broader service area. So as far as things we're doing well, as Ginger said, there's a lot of need, and we are a federal and state-based funded program. We roughly get about $1,200 per student to serve our students, and that's not a great deal of money in the scope of, or in the scheme of education. So we have been unfortunately underfunded over the years, and we have not seen an increase in about 10 years. So that's a challenge. But what we've done well is we've set up over 100 different class offerings in Central Indiana, where we serve students in every area of the city. Now, a lot of these are very organic grassroots classes, so they are embedded within community centers, churches, school systems, not-for-profit institutions. So there's not per se an adult ed named group. We're embedded in a lot of other organizations, so that visibility is a challenge, but over 100 classes is a really strong network of opportunities. One of the other things we've done well in the last few years is we've really tried to identify through IDOE information, Indiana Department of Education information, where there are pockets of potential immigrant students or English language learners, because as Ginger said, the census data is not very complete, especially with this population. So we're really trying to have a better understanding of not only where they are in the community, but once we bring them into our classes, doing language analysis and really starting to try and understand who these students are so that we can better serve them.
Okay, wonderful. I'll do one more follow-up question before I move to another panelist. Could you speak on the funding sources through DWD to support ELLs? For example, the source, I mean, I think you mentioned it's federal dollars, but the intended target population and any inherent limitations. For example, which immigrant groups might be left out of the funding streams and why?
Sure. So adult education has two primary funding streams, and it's a federal, we get federally funded through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, WIOA, and then there's a state match, which comes from state dollars. So currently it's about 11 million that comes from the federal side, and we have about 12.6, between 12.6 and 12.9 that is coming from the state side. So you're looking at a total of around roughly $23 million. And that is to serve not only English language learners, but to people who are working to get their high school equivalency diploma. And when WIOA legislation was reauthorized in 2016, it extended the activities that we needed to serve through this funding to include career training and workforce training. So the immigrant population is also served through those different categories, but it's probably a little bit out of balance simply because the language learning takes a little bit longer than some of the other activities that adult education programs are providing. It's a long-term process to really become fluent in English. And so we see those students stay with us a little bit longer, and we need to provide more wraparound services as well, as you mentioned, with the transportation in particular. But it's something we're working towards. Some of the inherent challenges or barriers is that the scope of instruction is determined by the federal government, by OCTAE, which is the Office of Career and Technical Education, which is a subsidiary of the Federal Department of Education. And they give an assessment that determines where the scope of instruction starts and where it ends. So it is an assessment system that has 6 different levels. And unfortunately, the first level does not do a great job of capturing lower level literacy learners. So when someone comes into a program, an adult education program, and they don't have basic skills such as decoding or knowledge of the alphabet, it's very difficult for adult education programs to serve them within the scope of instruction they've been kind of mandated to use by the federal government and really meet the needs of some of those lower literacy learners. And that's where the Immigrant Welcome Center, the Indianapolis Public Library System have really come in and helped us fill that gap, because it is a challenge to be able to meet the requirements of being a federally funded provider within the framework of learning they've provided to us.
Okay, thank you so much for those answers. I appreciate that. Let's hear from Aryan. We'll go to one of our other panelists, and then we'll just keep going back and forth between panelists. So we'll remove the spotlight, and Aryan Ibrahim, we will spotlight you. And Aryan, could you briefly introduce yourself and also speak to this situation facing many of the recent Afghan arrivals? For example, the common barriers that they would face to learning English?
Hello, everyone. My name is Aryan Ibrahim. I work with Immigrant Welcome Center since August 2021 as a program coordinator. Basically, I work closely with Ginger with the ELL program and the Pathway to Literacy program for the emergent readers that we have. For the new Afghan arrivals, the main barriers they face, I believe, like all other immigrants, I believe, there are, as we serve for the ELL and the literacy level classes, we have literacy level classes, and the amount of the number of students referrals that we get, and we talk to them about the barriers or whatever the needs of them that we talk to them. The first thing is the lack of literacy level classes in Indiana or in Indy. Because all other adult programs that we heard from the new Afghans, that all other adult programs around the city, it's just very high level for them, because most of them have a very low education level. They haven't even studied in their own language, or even they studied until elementary or not even high school. They really need the literacy level classes, just like Immigrant Welcome Center has this Pathway to Literacy program that we serve them through our online classes and in-person classes. But still there are these learners that are high school graduated, but still they want a very low level English class. But the only thing I always hear, because I always help with them, and I work with them with the to refer them, to place them in our English classes, or to refer them to other adult program around. So whatever I always hear is like, we are graduated from high school, but we don't know anything about the English language. We have been to Excel Center or any other English program, but that is too high for us. And we cannot place them in our literacy level classes because we have a limit, an education limit for them. It should be non-educated at all or until 6th or 7th grade. So I believe the literacy level classes could be one of the biggest barriers. Second thing that they really face when they want to go and learn the language, some other barriers could be transportation issue that Ginger also mentioned about some barriers, general barriers, and they actually exist and they are facing it. Childcare piece could be the other thing. Cultural barriers. They don't want to study with males. The females cannot go to a class where there are males, and they want a class where there are only females. The other thing that I got a lot of requests for that is private tutors. The ladies are like, we want someone to teach us at home, and it's really, really hard to find a volunteer to, go and have private tuition for them at home. It's really hard. So lack of those volunteers and tutors. So these are I think the main barriers the recent Afghan arrivals face a lot, because as I worked with them and as I hear about them, our pathway to literacy pilot 6 just started yesterday, and how many, not only the referrals that we got, but how many walk-ins we had yesterday to the in-person class, because I think that is the only in-person class with childcare and transportation that we provide through the Welcome.US grant. That is something really helpful for them. But there are these ladies that has a master's degree and bachelorate degree, and we cannot place them in our classes because that's not easy for them. That's very easy for them. Why? They are just coming there just for childcare issue and the transportation. So the barriers are for the new arrivals are, and until they're getting used to it, as everyone I think believe and mentioned about it, that the transportation issues, the cultural barriers, and the language thing is, especially this is really important for them because they need to have the employment.
Okay, thank you so much, Aryan. Now we'll go back to the organizational side, which is Erica from the Department of Ed. We're going to ask a few questions similar to the ones that we asked Lara. So Erica, in a desire to focus first again on what our city is doing well, can you share how the DOE is currently serving ELLs?
Yeah, I'd love to. My name's Erica Sponberg. I'm an English learner specialist with the Indiana Department of Education, and I've been with IDOE for over 2 years now. Before coming to IDOE, I was a visiting assistant professor at Valparaiso University, where my interests and specialty surrounded teaching English as a world language, pre-service teacher development, and language teacher professional development. So when I think about Central Indiana, and I also just wanted to apologize that we don't have the specific Central Indiana numbers, but I will have them later on. And when I do, I will share them with you, Ginger, and feel free to share them with those who are interested. But if you want, I can share some of the numbers that we do have of, sort of a demographic information about Indiana as a whole for the state. So in the state of Indiana, we have about over 77 77,000 students who are receiving English language learner services. However, we have just under 130,000 students who reported a language other than English just this last year. So that is about a 53% increase since 2016. We have 287 languages in the Indiana schools, and our top 5 are Spanish, Chin, Burmese, Arabic, and Punjabi. Across the state, we have in our rural areas, we have 123 LEAs. So I'll say LEA, but that you can see that as synonymous with school district. They reported about 1 to 10 EL students, and many of those were in rural communities. And we have about 101 charter schools who reported English learners, and that represents about 6%, a little over 6% of our EL population. We also have strong dual language programming in the state of Indiana. We have about 23 districts that have dual language programs in 42 buildings across the state. 2 districts are in the planning year this year and are preparing for kindergarten implementation of a dual language program. We have Spanish, Mandarin, and we do have 1 French program in the state of Indiana. However, the majority of our programs are still growing, which is exciting because now we have some programs who are moving into the secondary level and providing secondary dual language programming. Okay, so some of the things that we do that I do in my role to support the schools is, of course, we have our federal obligations. So we do on-site or virtual monitoring to just make sure that we're doing the very best we can to support our schools, and that our schools, first and foremost, are aware of their obligations, but also if they're facing any challenges, that's a moment when we can step in and provide one-on-one support, so to speak. We also do federal and state grant administration and management of those grants. We have several grants that I can tell you more about in a little bit. We provide professional development statewide. We provide state policy and guidance to our LEAs. We, are working on a variety of contracts and projects. We provide technical assistance and support to schools. We also have interdepartment collaboration and initiatives. And then we have WIDA assessment, and WIDA is our big state assessment for English learners, and is basically kind of the gatekeeper to first identifying students who might need English language services, but also an indicator of their growth. And then it also provides exit criteria for when those students no longer need English language services. And then we also are always developing resources and toolkits to share with the field. One thing that's really unique about Central Indiana, I think, is that it really has strong programming for providing English language supports. So when I look at the participant list here, you have the very best in the state represented here. You have folks from Perry, from Washington Township, IPS. They have some of the strongest EL programming in our state for K-12 students. And that's in part because they've been doing it for a really long time. And the majority of our ELs, outside of pockets that might be in Northwest Indiana or in Southwest Indiana, the majority of our ELs are located in Central Indiana. So you have experienced staff, you have a greater understanding of needs. And then you also have established systems that can really provide support, as well as administration can take, because of the need, you have opportunities for a more holistic approach to providing support for students. There's also access. I mean, you can't beat the type of access that you get when you're in an urban center. So you have access to wraparound services, and then you have just really strong EL leadership collaboration throughout Central Indiana.
Yeah, that's great. There was a chat. Go IPS.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Erica. And I think we'll come back about the funding sources, but I would like to ask Michael if I can ask you a question. So where is Michael? This is where, if we were in person, I would just look over at him and say, Michael. Jenny, do you see Michael?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so I want to spotlight you. There you are. Oh, thank you. Yay. Thank you, whoever spotlighted him. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And could you briefly introduce yourself, including the work that you did as parent liaison or family and parent liaison through Washington Township? And then also in your many roles, speak to the situation facing many of the people that you work with. So what common barriers to English learning do they face?
Thank you, Ginger, for giving me the opportunity to come on this panel. My name is Michael Mugoovi, originally from Democratic Republic of Congo. Yeah, I've been here now as about 8 years in Indiana. I love Indiana. So I've been working with Washington Township since 2015. I started as a custodian, then I started helping with the family liaison. There were so many challenges because we have so many parents. They can't read the student reports. They don't know how to, even though they send letters home from school, they won't be able to read them. So I was helping those who speak Swahili, French, and other couple Central African languages. I may speak like 5 to 7 languages. So yeah, there was so many, and even some new kids, they come, they don't know things like what food they have to eat. So language I was helping the parent to understand how the system works. And I also helping the teacher to understand the culture and interpret for them to make the message so the parent and the school can understand each other. So I was there for quite a long time in Washington Township. And then now I'm working with Exodus as a case manager. We receive refugees when they come to Indiana. We receive them from the airport. We help them set up the appointment for the doctor. It's a big challenge if you don't know the language. Sometimes we have to Uber them. It's a big problem. They won't talk with the Uber. They don't know where they're going. They can't ask questions. So there are so many problems. And I know among the most problem people can face anywhere you go is the language. If you don't speak the people's language, no matter how smart you are, how rich you may be, you will be in trouble because you may not know where you are going. You may not know how to read the signs. So when we work with the refugees and the other immigrants that come at Exodus, the first challenge is the language. They don't understand. Some of them, they don't know even how to read. They don't know how even to write in their own languages. So, and even those who know how to write, they don't know how to read English. They don't know how to write. So it's a big problem. Most of the things that I have seen here in Indiana, for sure the state is trying to address the kids, but they haven't really reached on the parents. So the city has left behind the parents. And these parents, they are the ones who are supporting the kids. Because if the parents don't know how to read, they can, even though the school sends documents, sometimes many parents, they don't know when they come in helping their kid to select classes, they can go because they won't know what they're talking about. So the city and the school, they are helping students to make good improvements, but parents hasn't yet been touched. So the city has forgotten them. So they just let them and they focus on kids. So most of the barriers, what I have seen so far, because I'm one of the people who faced these challenges too. So one of the things that I've seen, there is lack of awareness. So people don't know that there is English classes. And if they know, they are very few. And even the classes, they are far away. So these classes, they are not there. Let's say we know some areas like Nora areas, we have so many refugees sitting there. We have a class at Northview, but some of the people don't know. So that's one barrier. There is no awareness. People are not aware of English classes. The other thing is a transportation. When they come here, I know we have Indigo bus, but how can you tell someone who doesn't speak English to take Indigo? It will also require language. You need to put a card, you need to buy, you need to do this, you need to do this. So that's kind of the way things are shaped here. Everything is in English, and you will not go on the bus with an interpreter or something like that. So there's no transportation. The other thing, I think Ginger also mentioned it, there is no support to the parents. They don't have much support. So when the refugees came here, like Exodus, we have to support them like rent and other stuff for about 4 months. And within those 4 months, they don't have some document. They are still waiting to apply for Social Security card. They need to have a driver's license. And within those 4 months, they don't have any more assistance. So instead of them focusing on education or learning English, they go to work. So when they come from work, they are already tired, and there is no English classes that can fit their schedule. Sometimes some will come early in the morning, some will come in the afternoon. So the availability of classes, I don't think we have many English classes for adults here in India. Maybe they are there, but I don't think we do have much. So there is also, I wish if we can also have some online classes, because some parents we have, most of a family from Africa, they have big families. You may find 7 kids, 6 kids, 5 kids, and very young age. So childcare may be also another problem. But if there is also option for online classes for some parents, I think that would be a good help. But I wish the state can just focus much on how helping the parent also to know how to read, to know how to, even at work, some people have been taken, they just say, oh, you can't read here at work. They just kick them out because of the language. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael. And yes, there are a few chats. There's many organizations that do provide virtual classes and at different times. And so it might be the awareness factor that you're touching on, how to make sure that we are informing immigrant communities about the classes available. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm going to go back to Erica because Michael touched on a really great point of the feeling like the parents are a little bit left behind. So, there's the adult ed, which we'll get back to Lara too. But for now, Erica, my question for you is a little bit about the funding sources and really what challenges do K through 12 schools face in providing English classes for the parent population? That's the real important question. And I know that funding and the answer to that question are somehow tied. So could you address those?
Sure. Specifically on like community and parental engagement, schools or districts, LEAs who accept Title III funds, their Title III funding, part of that portion has to go to parent and family engagement. Another stipulation with Title III funding is that it has to be supplemental programming. So there are certain obligations that all schools need to provide students, and Title III has to be kind of, the cherry on the top of their already existing programming. So there is some funding, but like anything, sometimes it feels like it's never enough. We also have state funding. We have about 27 million at the state level for our English learner populations, which still can be lacking in providing our recommended per pupil amount. Our Title III funding for the state is about 9 million. That's the federal grant. We also have funding for students who have refugee status, and this next year it'll be right around 700,000. That's a really small population, and sometimes that funding also isn't sort of it's difficult to have a panacea, right? There's never so one of the things, but it's not impossible, right? When we're thinking about how we can really welcome parents, families, legal guardians, caregivers into the school, it really starts at that personal level. You will see a lot of LEAs who have people who are in a family liaison position, where their role is to provide that connection. And it also starts with front office staffing. You want to make sure that you have staffing there that has a multilingual background or has an understanding of languages and cultural differences that exist within the school and the community. And you just really need to also recognize the need, and taking that first step might be doing a needs analysis or a needs assessment of who your families are, where they're coming from, what are their challenges, what are the things that they do really well, and how can you then leverage those things and bring them into the school, and building a partnership as opposed to oftentimes in our school systems, there's a very much a top-down approach to most things. But when it comes to building community relations, you really need to have a two-way conversation, and you need to really build that relationship. Sometimes parents who, as the previous gentleman mentioned, struggle with language, they might not be as forthright in coming into the school and saying, hey, I need this, or, my student's struggling with this. So I think, there's also sort of learning how in the Indiana system, how a parent is able to find out and get resources and make sure their student or their child has access to those resources. There's also cultural norms embedded in those actions. So and I'll just reiterate, transportation, childcare, those are all challenges. And then the assumption that parents and families work a, quote unquote, traditional 9-to-5 schedule. And that's, of course, not always the case. So it is a challenge, but again, it's not impossible. There are districts that, are doing it well, and that do have programming. The first thought is Hammond offers classes for parents, and I think they also developed a system that had childcare and transportation embedded. I'm not sure of the full details of how their funding sources, but I think it also, because I think the population demanded it, and I think when things like that happen, it becomes easier. And when you have people in positions that have the ability to make those decisions and adjust the budget to make that a priority, that's when you can really start seeing those changes.
Yeah, that's really thoughtful and great response. Thank you. And if by chance you're with a K through 12 school and your school is providing ELL classes for your parent population, whether it's in partnership with an adult ed program or independently, could you just mention it in the chat? Because I'm not sure how many on this call have that experience. So that would be helpful if there's any that are doing that.
Yeah, I see Lisa from Perry. I
Yeah.
don't mean to call her out, but they do a great job. They have a lot of systems in place, and you're right. Let's hear it. It'd be great to hear from the LEAs who are, on the ground doing the work.
Yeah. And then before we move over to Yohana, who we haven't heard from yet, I want to swing back to Lara, because Michael mentioned the challenge of the schedule regarding work. And so we know that there's many challenges for employers to bring on-site workplace English classes for their employees. And I was wondering if you could address those challenges. And then he also mentioned the lack of availability. So maybe there's not enough classes or there's waiting lists. So those two are major challenges that I know the adult ed providers face. Could you address those?
Absolutely. What I want to say, first of all, is I think these type of forums where we can all kind of express what's out there, because I do get that there is a lack of understanding. There's not a lot of marketing behind what adult education offers, simply because there's not funding to go out and do widespread marketing efforts. I've put our outreach coordinator's email in the chat, Camelia Manring. She can connect anyone to the DWD services throughout Central Indiana and in the state. So like I said, there's over 100 different standalone classes in Central Indiana right now. It is the lack of awareness that is really, I think, holding a lot of people back from leveraging that resource. But we are also offering a statewide online only ELL program, and that is managed through Monroe County schools. So if there's not accessibility in Central Indiana, there is a day and an evening online virtual option for people to access to get some type of free instruction that is solely geared towards the English language learner. When we talk about English language learning, I said that we didn't do the best job of low level literacy, but about 42% of the students in English language learning in adult education come in at level 1. So we do serve people of all levels of English language learning. And I think one of our true challenges is a lot of school districts, K through 12 or charter, have not been able to make that partnership with the adult education programs that are already in the city and already established. Unfortunately, we haven't been part of this conversation. The adult education programs and the adult education systems have not, unfortunately, been part of the conversation as much as we probably should be, because to Michael's point, the parents are there, they're trying to support their students, and knowing that there is a class at Northview or at Warren Township or at Marian University is probably the biggest barrier we face right now, is that connective piece. So that's why Erica and I were talking at the beginning how we need to collaborate more and how we need to really figure out how to get that information out in a widespread basis. And I know the Immigrant Welcome Center was doing a database at one point. Like I said, at DWD, we have knowledge of what we do, but of course, we're not able to catalog every single opportunity that's in the city. So I think that type of resource is what we are all kind of talking around and how needed it is, because the services are there. There probably aren't enough of them, but there are a lot of established services in Central Indiana at this point. It's about leveraging and pulling together that knowledge where we're all working together to make sure we know what's available, even if our individual systems cannot meet that need on our own. Did I answer it all, Ginger?
Yeah, and could you address the challenges of workplace English classes?
Sure. Workplace English classes, we've actually expanded that quite a bit. That is our fastest growing area in adult education, particularly to the English language learners. We've added, I think, something like 15 to 20 different classes across the state. But of course, it takes more funding to do an on-site individualized class. And when you're stretched, when you have a scarcity of resources, you have to make sure that there is enough of a need. So when we're talking about an on-site learning class, they've been established throughout the city. We've got one at Dormicaba, we've got Heartland Foods, we've got Amazon, we've got through the health systems, IU Health, Community Health. There's a new one starting at Stratosphere. These are things, though, that the employer has to be willing to support. And that's, and Geodis, sorry, I forgot to mention that. the employer buy-in has to be there, because we've established classes where we put them on site, and unfortunately, the employer pulls the student out of the class if they need to do overtime or if there's some, workplace need. So really getting that employer buy-in is the key piece in establishing those services and having them be effective. Also, sometimes students would rather go to a different site. They would rather get away from the workplace. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because we want to take those services to the workplace, but then to have someone on site in their work environment at that workplace for 10, 12 hours during the day becomes a challenge for them as well. So I think that is one piece of the puzzle, and we've been expanding and doing a good job in that area, but it's not a panacea, because we absolutely have to make sure that there are more options than just that piece of learning for these adults.
Yes, thank you for speaking to that. And as Michael mentioned, the employment and work schedules is one of the major challenges that he notices. And now I would like to introduce Yohana. I can find her. Oh. Can someone, Jenny, can you find Yohana and spotlight her?
Yes.
There she is. Hi. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Ginger.
So thank you for coming. Misty is going to interpret. The questions that we have for you, Yohana, are: could you tell us about your background, your educational background from your country, and your language journey, and the barriers that you have faced along the way? So, yeah, go ahead. Thanks.
Hola, Yohana. Muchas gracias por estar aquí hoy. Yo seré su intérprete. Podemos comenzar. Puede presentarse brevemente, incluyendo información académica en su país de origen.
Sí, mi nombre es Yohana Villamizar y soy de Venezuela.
My name is Yohana Villamizar and I'm from Venezuela.
En mi país cursé estudios como contador y como administrador de empresas.
In my home country, I worked in accounting and administration.
Realicé una especialización en auditoría y una maestría en negocios y mercadeo.
And I also have a master's in business and marketing.
Actualmente voy a cumplir 3 años de estar aquí en este país.
And my 3-year anniversary of being in this country is soon approaching.
Y parte de lo que vengo a compartir con ustedes es cómo ha sido mi experiencia con respecto al desafío de aprender el idioma.
And I'm here to share my perspective on the barriers in terms of learning a new language.
Yes, thank you, and we welcome you. And would you be willing to share some of the barriers that you faced in your language learning journey?
¿Puede compartir su proceso lingüístico y las barreras que usted enfrentó?
Sí, llegué a Estados Unidos hablando cosas muy básicas en inglés. Realmente es diferente a los cursos que uno puede tomar en el país. Cuando venimos aquí nos damos cuenta que es otra manera de hablar, otro ritmo de hablar, así es que sentimos como que no hubiésemos estudiado antes nada con respecto al idioma.
Okay. I'm going to make a comment. Yohana, le voy a pedir que hable en 2 o 3 frases a la vez.
Okay.
Quizás se me olviden algunas cosas. Yohana states that she knew very basic English when she first arrived to the United States. And as she spent more time here, she realized that what she knew was very basic. ¿Me puede repetir la segunda parte de lo que usted dijo?
Ok, la enseñanza de inglés en mi país es diferente cuando venimos a ponerla en práctica aquí en la realidad.
She realized how different the English that she had learned was compared to the English that she had to perform with here in the States.
Ok, dentro de las principales barreras que tuve fue lograr ajustar los horarios y aprender del sistema.
One of the biggest obstacles or barriers were adjusting to the schedule.
Mi llegada a este país no fue planificada, fue más bien por una situación que me obligó a tomar la decisión de venir.
My journey to the United States was not planned. I was rather forced, and that is why I arrived.
Ok, así es que tuve que priorizar entre resolver los asuntos básicos o primarios para poder vivir aquí.
So I had to prioritize basic needs and really take into account what my priorities were.
Y luego poder intentar buscar el tiempo que me permitiera trabajar e intentar aprender el idioma.
And then another obstacle was trying to find time to learn the new language.
La barrera de horarios, como la han mencionado, es bastante importante.
Scheduling was a very big barrier for me, and it was very important.
Además de la accesibilidad o la posibilidad de contar con alguien que me ayudara en los procesos de registración y de conocer los sitios en los que se impartían estas clases.
It was a barrier trying to find somebody who could help me register for classes.
Además de eso, una vez que tuve la oportunidad de ingresar en alguno de los programas, cuando hay grupos muy grandes, es difícil que, por lo menos para mí, poder satisfacer justo las necesidades que claramente yo tenía.
In large group settings, it was difficult for me to satisfy my own needs.
Y pues eso, aunado a los cambios de horario, no permitió que fuera tan consistente en la consecución de las clases.
And due to the schedules, I wasn't able to be consistent with the classes.
Actualmente estoy intentando de nuevo ingresar a alguno de los programas que se dan en la ciudad.
Additionally, I am now trying to be a part of the classes that are offered in the city.
Así es que me encuentro en espera de que acepten mi registración para poder retomar de nuevo las clases.
And I am currently waiting for my registration to be accepted so that I can begin classes once again.
Okay, thank you so much. And could you also speak a little bit on trying to transfer your credentials from your country to our system?
¿Nos puede contar de las barreras que enfrentó al tratar de transferir sus credenciales y trabajo en su especialidad de estudio?
Sí, inicialmente cuando quise hacer la validación de mis documentos, conseguí algunas barreras que son muy importantes y me hicieron tener que paralizar este proceso de forma inmediata.
From the beginning, I was faced with barriers that forced me to put a pause in the process of trying to transfer my credentials.
La primera es que iba a necesitar tiempo para poder tomar clases que permitieran compensar justamente o que permitieran la validación, y para el momento de mi llegada no era posible porque tenía que trabajar para poder cubrir mis gastos básicos.
My first obstacle was trying to take courses that would help that would help transfer my credentials. But that was difficult because I had to prioritize employment in order to provide for myself and my basic needs.
Y la segunda era justamente el dinero, porque son costos que para este momento no podía cubrir, así es que tuve que dejarlo detenido hasta que pueda tener un poco más disposición de tiempo para tomar las clases que me harían falta y el dinero para poder cubrir esos gastos extra.
Finances were also an obstacle. I had to prioritize my needs and then make time to attend those classes.
Okay, thank you so much for being with us and for sharing. I'd like to swing back to Aryan and ask if you could share, could you share about a solution to common barriers that you're aware of that is working well?
As I mentioned about the barriers that lack of literacy level classes, transportation, or some cultural barrier exists as well. Something that I think worked very well in this time period that I'm working with the literacy level classes. We have classes for those emergent learners with transportation. We transport some of our students that are actually, it's a grant that is funded by Welcome.US grant. Also, we just started another a literacy level class yesterday, and it has the childcare on-site childcare piece. So far, we have a lot of Afghans that are really interested to join those classes. First of all, it has childcare. Second, it has the transportation issue is solved there. I think these two barriers are like the biggest barriers that they are facing. And if we have more classes like this, because this is the last pilot and we may not even have this kind of classes anymore. So I think if we have more literacy level classes where we can at least think of these two barriers, the childcare and transportation, that can solve a lot of problems, especially for the females. Afghan community, as an Afghan, I think I can talk on behalf of my community that culturally men work out, men work out, and women should stay home and take care of kids. And this is the men's responsibility to pay all the household expenses and everything. Women should take care of the children, and that is the problem, that at least the women should learn how to go to their health appointments, how to go to shopping, and these all I think are possible if they know the language. But as I mentioned, that all other adult programs are very high for them. They started it, they left. I believe if there are anyone from Excel Center, Indy Reads, I'm sure you all are aware of it, that so many Afghan ladies or gentlemen that joined you last year, they all left in just few weeks. That's because they thought that the levels are very high for them. They want to start from somewhere like the very, very low level. So I think if we have more literacy level classes for them, and if we can take care of those main barriers, that could be really, really helpful. The second thing, as I mentioned before as well, about the private tutoring, or if we can have volunteers that can tutor and go to their homes and have tuition with them, that could be very, very helpful. Even we have we have Afghan communities in West Side and in South Side, and all of them are like very like live in the close neighborhood, and they all are, even if we have a tuition private tutoring class, they can all come together in one's house and have that. So I think these two things, if there's any way we can take care of, that would be really, really helpful and supportive to the Afghan community for the English learning barriers that they are facing.
Okay, thank you so much, Aryan. And let's go back to Michael, and I'm going to ask the same question. Michael, could you share about a solution to common barriers that you are aware of that is working well?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so there is some solutions that I am thinking of that will be working well, or what are working well. What I have seen has already been mentioned. When we have some tutoring, I have some couple refugees that I know that has already been being tutored. So when there is some tutors and people who can reach to them, I know some families that I talk to them, hey, there is English class, you need to go, and try to emphasize them. So when you try to push them, they go, they attend those classes. So sometimes in the middle of the program, they drop off for many reasons. You may find childcare, work change, they have changed the work, and they change the schedule. So that was one. But if I would have to bring a solution to this situation, I would like, maybe I have experience from other countries. It's just in a general way of the way how we can address this. Because if language is not addressed, people will not be successful. We can assume no one will have a good paying job. No one will go further. So nothing will really go well if English, or if the language is left behind. One of the options, to me, if I have a magic way to take care of this situation, I will make English classes a mandatory to everyone who comes to the United States. I will make it a mandatory. It is working in the other countries. We have many friends in Norway, in Sweden, in France, wherever. They have made it a mandatory to everyone. But when we come here, they just leave you. So you don't care. You just care about, but when you face a problem, that's the time you start realizing that, oh, I need the language. So if it was me, I would just make English mandatory. Everyone here needs to learn English, and make it a strict, connected to the assistance that the refugees are getting. Try to make it easier, make the process easier for them to register. Because we are also facing another issue. When they go there to register, they will have English. They will need someone present to help them understand what they are. Here it's a country of paper. United States is a country of paper. So there's so many paper to write, so many paper to sign here, right here, complete this. So someone doing that. So I would like this to be a mandatory option for everyone, not just a choice. So that if really to want people to advance, they need to make it a mandatory. The other thing, I would like to create more classes and mostly focus on areas like someone has said here, like if we know like South Side in such kind of apartment, try to see if there is a way people can go there and talk or reach to these agencies that receive refugees and try to tell you, we have many refugees here, and try to connect them. Personally, I work with some clients, they say, I need English right away. So when we connect them to Exodus, it takes a process, and sometimes they don't come. Sometimes we have so many other things. So if there can be a connection between the English classes and the agencies that receive refugees, so that they can connect them together and try to work together, that will help too. Because many people don't know. Like I'm here, I don't know how many English classes. I just know a couple of them, like 2, and one in the area where there is no refugee. They may be there, but they are very few. So that would be, and make it try to find volunteers and make it aware, try to find a way to reach out to those people. And we have like some cultures, yeah, women are kind of left behind. They don't know how to, some of the women didn't go to school in some countries. So let's try to create a way to make them aware and give them opportunity to know even how to write their names. So to me, I will just see if there's a way to make it mandatory and have more people to reach to these people, because they are there, they don't know. And even someone, like when they come, I say, hey, I'm your case manager, there is English class. I spoke with them just in 3 months and I leave them. So, and then they will be in work. They start looking for work because there's no help. Yeah, if it's a mandatory and there is some kind of assistance that they are getting to push them, keep learning. So I think in 2 years, in 1 year, if we make it a mandatory, we have almost many people at least know how to write, how to read, and how to say hello, hi, how to talk with their supervisor at work. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So Michael answered one of the last questions that we wanted to ask to the panelists. So I'll ask Lara, I'll have you come back on, and if somebody could spotlight, here we are. Okay. So the magic wand question, if you had a magic wand and could immediately change or create one thing to welcome and support English language learners better in our city, what would it be and why? So in his magic wand answer, he touched on capacity issues, right? Like more classes and they should be mandatory. So how would you answer that question?
Yeah, well, I don't want to make anything mandatory because I always want to respect people where they are and provide access when people are ready to join those services. And that's kind of the beauty of adult education. We meet people where they are. So when people come into the system, they are assessed, they are placed in a class that is appropriate for their levels. And, you know, we've also talked about that lower level literacy. That's a really tough one, but there's a lot of advocacy that needs to be done. A lot of the adult education providers and people across the education space have been advocating Octave to change their scope of assessments. And so if I had a magic wand, I would expand the assessments and the scope of instruction that is currently funded through the federal WIOA legislation and dollars. That is what I would do so that we are able to responsibly serve everyone in this community. Because if we go outside of that scope of instruction and we aren't successful, then that jeopardizes the funding we do have. So it is a very difficult line to walk. And Ginger and I have talked about this quite a bit, that we need to extend the services in the community. And I know the Immigrant Welcome Center has gotten a grant from Lilly because we are very fortunate in Central Indiana that the Eli Lilly Foundation supports this type of work. So expanding that spectrum of services and tying it together more in a network. That is where I would like to see us go. So of course we want more funding, but you have to have funding that's dedicated to certain areas. There's a really interesting study that was put out in June of 2021 by the Migration Policy Institute, and it's called Leaving Money on the Table. And it really does a good job of examining what the immigrant population is looking like that's coming not only to the United States, but to Indiana specifically. And Yohana touched on something very important, is that a lot of our new immigrant neighbors are coming in with very high levels of education. And in fact, that study cites that there is a higher level of post-secondary, which is college attainment and professional level experience with our immigrant population than there is with our native-born population at this point in time. So it's really important for us to recognize the skills, the immense talents of the immigrant population that is coming in here. And if I had another magic wand, because, you know, I'm at the Department of Workforce Development, I would want to find a way to really transfer those skills in a meaningful way so that our greater community understands the immense resource that this population presents to Indiana, Central Indiana, the whole country. But to your point, to everyone's point, the key to unlocking those skills and securing wages and jobs that are commensurate to that experience is English. It's English, because we cannot provide translation services throughout the whole spectrum of employment, we have to focus on English. And so really having those dedicated services to put that first building block piece in place so that the rest of the things can fall along the way. Like I said, everybody wants the immigrant population, especially in this forum, to be successful and to be recognized for who they are, the immense talents and experiences that they are bringing to not only Central Indiana, but our entire state. That is, that's my big pie in the sky wish, that we would recognize the value that is right here in our community already.
That's wonderful. So you got 2 magic wands, and I want to hang on to those wands as well, because they address the beginning level. They're at both ends of the spectrum, the beginning level learners and the highly skilled, highly educated learners. So Erica, would you weigh in on your thoughts on capacity building? Really, if you had a magic wand and could change one thing, what would it be?
If I had a magic wand, I think that I would want us as a state to continue the mindset shift towards valuing multilingualism. Yes, of course, English is spoken in this state, but oftentimes when I think about our K-12 kids, they don't see that learning or knowing multiple languages is an asset. And so I would want, that would be sort of my magic wand, because as soon as we create a society that values many languages, then I think some of these other barriers might fold by the wayside in my dream land.
We all need dreamland.
That's right.
Okay, and let's see. Let's ask Yohana if she could change one thing. If you could just go bing and change one thing, what would you change?
Yohana, si usted tuviera una varita mágica y pudiera cambiar o crear algo para dar la bienvenida o apoyar a los estudiantes, ¿qué sería?
Me gustaría que el programa o el programa fuese adecuado a las necesidades particulares de cada participante.
I would like for the program to specifically fit or be fitting to the participants' needs.
Sé que es un desafío porque somos muchas personas que necesitamos aprender.
And I know that's a big challenge because there are a lot of people that need to learn.
Pero considero que podría ser mucho más efectivo justamente para avanzar de nivel para quienes estamos accediendo a estos programas.
But I do believe that it would be very efficient for those participating in the program.
Okay, thank you so much. So now we are going to ask the audience. We're going to take some questions from the audience before we wrap up. So Jenny has kindly been monitoring the chat. And Jenny, where's Jenny? I don't see Jenny.
Hi, Ginger, I'm here.
Okay. Jenny, could you read out the first question that came through?
Okay, so first question is from Karen. Are the numbers from... I am sorry. Ginger, I actually sent you the questions. Could you please read them for me?
Oh, here we go. Are the numbers from Indiana Department of Ed from those who have children registered students? Do you find immigrant students who are not attending school? So that's a question for Erica.
Hi, yeah, the numbers that I presented are of our K-12 population who are registered in our Indiana schools. Yeah, unfortunately, I do not have the numbers of people who are of school aged who are not registered in the schools. That's not something that we collect.
That makes sense. And then there's a question from Judy at Marian University. Many of our ELL students can't get their SSN number without ID, and they can't get ID if they don't have an SSN number or certificate. So how do we help these adult students get a tax identification number? Who would like to answer that question?
Ginger, I'm going to ask Misty. She's going to be on a spot. She can answer this question because we do this work at the Immigrant Welcome Center.
Thank you, Gurinder. I think that, there are multiple ways that we can support individuals who perhaps don't have federal identification or a social security number. And I'm glad someone mentioned ITIN numbers because they are a resource that I share with our community all the time. I meet with people who don't have a way to obtain documentation that will change their status in the country, and that is typically the population that we recommend apply for an ITIN number. For those who don't know, an ITIN number is a number you apply for using any form of identification. It can be from your home country. So in many cases, it is a passport. And this number allows individuals to file taxes every year. And some employers will accept them, and even some property managers at apartment complexes will accept them as a substitution. But they are not a substitution for a social security number. There are places throughout the city that are certified to validate the person's identification, so the person's passport. Otherwise, and I'll give an example, if somebody wants to apply on their own, or if somebody here wants to help an individual apply for an ITIN number, then that identification must be mailed to the IRS, which I don't recommend and I never suggest people doing. I always recommend finding a certified institution. Sometimes they're called Servitax. I have a list of them. Sometimes it's a public notary that has been certified. Sometimes it's an attorney. And I have a list of those for anybody who's interested. And that individual is able to fill out the application for the immigrant or the individual, look at the ID, the passport, submit the application, and then it takes a few weeks, about a month to get that number in, and that number is very beneficial. Again, I highly recommend informing your community about that.
And Misty, can you put your email in the chat? She's very knowledgeable about those legal and naturalization issues. And then we also wanted to make sure there were some wonderful comments, just different organizations in response to the discussion, sharing the offerings, like Catholic Charities offers lots of classes, English or civics classes. And of course, Indie Reads offers virtual and in-person classes, and lots of the DWD programs offer virtual and in-person. Crystal House, one of the, like similar to Excel Center, they have morning, afternoon, evening classes, and they welcome all adults. And Marian University builds ELL classes on Tuesday, Thursday. So I think that's all in response to, what classes are out there and the barrier of lack of awareness. So
Ginger?
yeah.
Hi,
Yeah.
this is Gurinder. I know that we are recording this meeting, so we will make the recording of this meeting available to those who are interested, and we'll also provide a synopsis of some of the resources that were shared. So please, those who are asking for those resources, do know that we will do that. There are some good conversations going on, and I know that we're getting to the top of the hour, but before you all go, because I heard you all talk a lot about advocacy, and the question of IDs is such a big question. It would be remiss if we don't talk about that currently for the umpteenth time in our legislation at the state level. There is a driver's card bill that has been issued, and it's an important bill. Please support that bill. Call your local legislators, tell them that you support that bill. What will happen with this bill is that individuals will not have a driver's license, but they will have a driver's card, which means they'll be able to get insurance. And then the fear of, being stopped by police will go away to a certain extent. And also this will serve as a state, there are so many benefits that'll come from having this driver's card. So it would be remiss if we don't talk about that. An Immigrant Welcome Center is advocating for this to be passed. And there's really, really good conversations, Ginger. There's talk about how can we get this conversation going, which, Reuben Education Series, this is a big one, but we have others that Ginger will talk about that she has planned. But we're really grateful for you being all here. And those of you who don't know me, I'm Gurinder. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Immigrant Welcome Center.
Mhm. Yes, she is my boss.
Well, not only that, but just working alongside you. And we would also like to, take a picture. The bill is drivers driving cards. That's what it's called. So if you can turn your cameras on so that Jenny, if you are comfortable, can take a picture.
Okay, and actually we're not quite finished, but I mean, if everyone wants to do that now, I guess Jenny can take a picture now.
All right.
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. I mean, originally it was scheduled from 12:30 to 2:30. So we have a few more minutes. We will finish before 2:30, but we're not going to do a hard stop at 2 because I wanted to be sure that if anyone else had a question, they could put it in the chat before we do the official wrap up. So are there any other questions that we missed?
Yes, Ginger, I sent you some more questions.
In the chat?
Yes, I can resend them to you. Just a second.
Okay, because there are questions.
There's a question in the chat that is, do you have an avenue for our higher educated ELLs to get their college degrees? This is from Karen Crawford.
Ginger, I mean, I have students who are psychologists. I mean, I'm just out here in rural Indiana, and I have chemistry graduates from their countries. I mean, we have a lot, but I don't know where to tell them. I mean, like you were talking about wasted resources. Is there a place I should be directing them to contact someone that maybe can verify their credentials or something like that? That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, the verifying credentials is quite a difficult process, but there are, through the adult ed programs, there are parapro and certification programs. And there's also, I mean, Ivy Tech.
I teach the parapro certification. I mean, I was talking about more like, is there a program where they can, that evaluates their college degree so that it can be?
There is, Karen. So these are very expensive. I'm a physical therapist. They are very expensive, and World Education Services is a nationally known organization. Again, they are very expensive, and they will do an assessment of what their degree is and how it kind of relates to the degrees that are offered by American institutions. World Education Services is one that is nationally accepted by a lot of professional organizations. Again, I will tell you, this is very expensive process.
And we have a list of other ones as well, a resource list of other certification organizations that immigrants have used successfully. And then here's a question for Erica from Matt. Can you help me understand how the school system supports with middle and high school students who speak virtually no English for the 8 hours at school? Thinking of the young Afghan lady in Washington Township and another in IPS. So what are ways that they would be supported in a typical K through 12 school?
Yeah, so in the state of Indiana, we have local control. So that means that the schools are allowed to develop programming and supports that are specific for their context and for their student population. We have certain federal requirements that schools are supposed to adhere to. That is typically 4 to 5 days a week, 30 to 45 minutes per day of direct English language learning instruction by an individual, an educator who is licensed in English language learning. So that's the baseline. However, services can look like a variety of things that can be in addition to those English language courses that would be embedded in that student schedule. It would also could look like having a paraeducator who's bilingual to support that student in a variety of their courses. It might look like after school tutoring. It might look like intensive summer programming. Yeah, it can look like many things. But I also just want to emphasize that when we are in a language environment that's different from our own, we suddenly learn how much we learn from the unspoken language, right? As I know we're all, language learners or lovers of language in this room. And there's also, we'll take the liberty to assume that there's a great desire to learn the language because you want to make friends, especially, when you're young. So when you have those pieces of the puzzle together, an individual can pick up on things quite quickly to be able to immerse themselves into the school. And we also try to train our teachers, right? We also have Indiana, sorry, I could go on forever about how do we support our students. We have an ELTOR that can also provide teachers of service the best support possible, so that when that teacher has students in the classroom that come from a variety of language backgrounds, they're using techniques to make the language accessible, as well as teaching content.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that answered Matt's question really well. And then there was another question about which districts provide virtual. Lara, you could probably speak to this, but I think most do at this point, right?
For adults, if the question is for adult learning, it kind of varies, like Indy Reads does, Washington Township does. I'm not sure about Marion. I know Judy Bardonner's on here, but it really varies program to program. But once again, there is a statewide online ELL virtual learning option. So even if an individual school district does not offer that specific service, there is a way for them to be connected and access those programs and those classes through any of the adult education or programs, or through Camelia Mannering, the outreach coordinator, and her information was in the chat.
Okay. Yes, Marion offers online Tuesday and Thursday. Yeah. Okay, any other final questions for the panelists? And if not, then we'll wrap it up with a few. Okay. So I'm just going to share. Here are our lovely panelists. And these are the questions. So I would love all of you to put the answer to this question in the chat. Of all of the barriers that immigrant learners face, which is the most glaring to you? Which is the one that is the most glaring? You could think about that for a second and just put your answer in the chat. Okay. Okay, this is great. And then another question, of all the barriers that immigrant learners face, which seems the most insurmountable to you and why? Like that we just can't do much about that. It just seems impossible. Nothing is impossible, but which seems the most insurmountable to you and why? Health, fear. Intimidation. Worry of judgment. Interesting, yeah. Transportation. No public transportation in rural Indiana. And there's no one from Indigo on this call. Okay, and then if, just as the panelists answer this question, if you, the audience, if all of us had a magic wand and could immediately change or create one thing to welcome and support English language learners better in our city, what would it be? "24-hour English classes." That is truly a magic wand. Tailored instruction. Okay, it's nice to dream. It's good for us to dream. So, okay, to continue the conversation, there was a question, how do we continue? So the Rubin Educational Series that this is part of, it's a 3-part series. And so there will be 2 other upcoming meetings in February and March. They will both be virtual, I think. This one was supposed to be the in-person one. And so we will focus on faith-based solutions. There are churches and mosques and schools maybe that are providing ELL classes for their communities, and also K through 12 solutions. And then Wednesday, March 29th, the on-ramp to employment per Karen's question, I think it was, and transferring of credentials and what is available through adult ed and the other adult learning communities and organizations. What are the on-ramps for employment? So those are coming up, and we invite you all to attend. And what we do know from this meeting and from the many other meetings we have is that in terms of supporting English language learners, collaboration is key. No one program or school or organization can do it alone. And so we're all walking on a journey together with a common goal. And we agree with this quote. It's one of my favorite quotes, that it's incumbent upon all of us to work together to expand it's incumbent upon states and municipalities and local programs to work together to expand opportunities for holistic support in English language and literacy programming. And we do believe that by coordinating our efforts and seeking to serve those marginalized by language barriers, we, all of us, hope to make our city and state more welcoming to all. So that is the official end. And I really, really appreciate all of you sharing your time with us this afternoon. And if we had been in person, we would have been able to do a lot more small group brainstorming and talking, but in the virtual environment, it's a little more difficult. So thank you for coming, and I will hang out for a little while, but thank you panelists. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Yohana. Thank you, Aryan and Lara and Erica so much for taking time to share with us. We really appreciate it.